Thank you everyone for joining us for another Techno Brew episode. And this time I have the pleasure of speaking with Iliana Rocha, President and Lead Coach of Clubnet. Hi Iliana, how's it going?
Hey Carlos, I'm doing well. How are you?
Very good. It is really great to have you. We have known each other for some time now, from back in
Hmm.
our All Stream days.
Probably going
And
on a decade.
yeah, wow, it's true. I hadn't really thought about how long it'd been, but yeah, probably about the better part of a decade. And
Hmm.
it's really great to have you here. And I was really excited because we're going to talk about something that is very near and dear to your heart, which is leadership. And why is it so difficult
Hmm.
to lead, or maybe it isn't? And
Hmm.
why is it so difficult, I guess, to identify uh, a good fit for a leader, I guess, for a team, right? So
Hmm.
and developing the skill sets to properly lead a team and I guess inspire and direct, orchestrate
Hmm.
all the moving parts, herding cats.
Definitely. So I think one of the myths is out there is that you're either born a leader or you're not. And that is absolutely not the case. There's study after study that says like we need to develop our leadership muscles and we can build those up and we can be the best leaders we possibly can be. So part of it is a mindset that we go into. And then there's a whole bunch of organizational challenges that come with that, right? So, first of all, how do we actually identify who a good leader is? Unfortunately, most organizations do so by who is a good individual contributor. That is not in any way predicting who's going to turn out to be a good leader. You need to be looking for somebody who has the growth mindset, but also has the desire to go out there and lead teams. Because what ends up happening is all of
Yeah,
these people get promoted into leadership positions and they take them because there's no alternate individual contributor path that will give you the raise, right? So like if you want to make more money, now you're going to be a leader. Well, only about 35% of frontline leaders actually want to deal with leading their employees. They don't want, the remainder don't want to own their own personal professional development, let alone their employees' professional development. And then part of the drivers behind that is I coach a lot of next generation leaders, emerging leaders, whatever you want to call them.
yeah,
And invariably, first of all, nobody's explained to them what it means to be a leader, what they need to consider, and what their day to day might look like. And let alone then equipping them to have difficult conversations, how to motivate and empower employees, right? So
yeah.
we have like failures across the board. The reality of it is that I usually do this in about 5 coaching sessions. By the end of those 5 coaching sessions, we've talked about a framework around how to think about leadership, what aligns with your own personal authentic self, how to continue to grow. And we talk about like the most pertinent tools to you as an individual so that you can be successful in a leadership position.
That's a lot to unpack. People who are looking for career advancement, who are future minded, are kind of pushed into this leadership corner, right? This is the
Hmm.
avenue you're going to go. I guess organizations maybe don't present the full reality of the possible streams that you could go into to realizing
Hmm.
whatever you want to accomplish. And
And
is,
in
is
tech,
that
you might
yeah,
have those parallel streams, right? In tech, you might be able to be like a senior developer, an engineer, whatever the case may be, that gives you the pay raise without necessarily having to take on the leadership accountabilities. For most, though, especially outside tech, that doesn't even exist.
yeah, I was going to say that because that's where we play.
Yeah.
But if you're in like operations or marketing or
Yeah.
sales, right?
SOL. But I think one of the easier things, like we can't address that. I, as a coach, can't um, necessarily, unless I'm coaching an executive who can make organizational
Right. The
changes,
CEO,
right?
the COO, right.
I, as a coach, can't influence that. And so when I coach people, I talk to them about like their sphere of influence and the different aspects of leadership. And you started with why is leadership so hard, is we look at it as this global thing and we don't break it down in some manageable components. So when I think about leadership, I think about me as a leader. So like I have more control over my leadership style, my growth journey, how I want to lead a team, right? Then my level of control drops a little bit when you get to the we part, which is my immediate team. So how am I delivering through this team? How am I managing their performance, and so on and so forth? And then the point where most people don't have control is the us piece. So the organizational alignment, how does my team and I fit in this overall organizational context? So a lot of people end up spinning their wheels thinking they need to affect change within the organization and then like the team. But what I say is start from the inside. You need to understand the type of leader you are and you want to be. And then you need to understand how to manage what is closest to your scope of control before trying to affect change that might be that much more difficult to come about.
If my leadership philosophy is clashing with my CEO's leadership philosophy, as probably happens in many organizations, I'm fighting a losing battle. So
I mean, you might be somebody who has maybe some influence, right? So I don't want to say whenever it comes down to your organization, you just kind of have to take what comes your way, but you have to recognize the boundaries of your own influence and power,
right.
because otherwise, if you try to push beyond that, you're just going to get yourself frustrated. And as you said, you're fighting a losing battle at that point.
Yeah. I guess this will lead me to my next question, which is what is the right blend, I guess, of leadership styles that
Mhm.
you are trying to develop in your
In my
clients?
coaching session,
Yeah,
yeah,
in your
like,
coaching setting.
so I like to have fun with this one because we talk
Right.
about leadership styles all the time. So I use a Blake Moulton like modified model, and so that looks at a leader's concern for people and then concern for deliverables, right? And so it gives you four different leadership styles, and we've aligned them, and like my social media team and I have aligned them to some famous characters from movies, right?
Okay.
So I I have a test, I give it to somebody, what is your leadership style that you gravitate to? Then we talk about that, and then we dissect how do you move to the next leadership style. So
Right.
so really the summary is, if you have very low interest in the people you support and as well as low interest in deliverables, you are what we call the chaos manager, and that is Michael Scott from The Office. It is like
Yeah.
all he wants to do is have fun, and he frustrates his team that to the point where they can't get any work done,
Yeah.
right? That being said, there's absolutely appropriate times when you can be a Michael Scott, and I do act like Michael Scott sometimes when you need to release tension, when you have a highly creative team, and all that great stuff, right? Then there's people who are interested in results but not in people. I call that the dictator, Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada, right? Zero interest in whether you're happy or not. Just get me the Harry Potter book on my desk by 7 a.m. with the coffee or whatever it was. Again, there's a time and a place for this leadership style, and that is, especially if you don't have time to collaborate and co-create, you might need to direct. Obviously, hopefully you're being nicer than Miranda Priestley. Or if you're working with a very junior team and you kind of have to be a lot more directive, right?
Yeah. Because you're faced with the deer in the headlights every day.
Exactly. Pretty much, right? So sometimes you can't coach people. You got to tell them and you got to direct them. So, okay, so that's that one. Then there's the person who is super interested in the individual, but like results, not a big deal. I call that the pushover, Dumbledore from Harry Potter.
Right.
Okay, like he's so interested in everybody being happy and loving him, to the point that like they're not learning their magic spells. And again, there's a place and a time for it. When you don't have like very hard deadlines and you don't need to stress out about your deliverable, you definitely can do that kind of like
Right.
loosey goosey, and we'll get to it when we get to it.
Yeah.
But where I always try to get people to, once they identify their personal leadership style, to move to is the servant leader, because the servant leader looks at both the results and the individual, and wants to meet the desired objectives while continuously growing the individual. So for this one, we think about Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek, right? So basically, it is a matter of understanding your leadership position as not somebody who has to have every answer, but somebody who removes blocks and then moves out of the way of very smart people who have been hired to do their jobs. And to me, a servant leader leadership style is applicable almost always, except for in slight augmentations in some of the other leadership styles that we talked about.
And I love the way you align it with these characters that we can all relate to. You know, because who hasn't had a Michael Scott as a boss, or a Miranda Priestley, or a Dumbledore? Jean-Luc Picard, probably you might have people saying, "I've never had that kind of style. I wish." And that's maybe why it's so challenging, and why it's so confounding. It reminded me of a friend of mine. He manages big box superstores,
Yeah.
and he is moved from location to location. He'll be there for maybe 5 years, and then he'll move to another location. I really think he's this servant leader type, because not only does everyone love him, he's always blowing his objectives out of the water. And I asked him, "What's your, obviously you're a lovable guy, and I've known you for years. You're, I can see why people like you and everything. Well, what's your secret when you're managing people?" He says, I don't want to be worried about, is this getting done? Is that set up? Are we meeting our numbers? What I do with my team, I'll identify who has potential that I think, or what do they have to start with, and then I'll help develop their skills so that they become their own managers and they can direct. And he says,
Mm-hmm.
I've actually helped promote other people to my role. I think he's helped like maybe
Yeah.
at least 5 people in the last 10 years to that get to that level, and then others to, like, department managers and what have you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and he said, so by the time, year two comes around, and three and four, Carlos, I'm sitting back and I'm kind of laughing, because I know I can trust my team. I know that they're committed, and that they want to do well, not just, because they like me, and it's important, but for themselves. And I can see them helping to develop the skill set within the people that work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So
And think about how impactful it is to know somebody like that, and how unfortunate it is that most people don't get exposed to somebody like that. Because then what
yeah,
is going to motivate you, right? Like when you observe the dictator constantly getting airtime, constantly getting promotions within organizations, it
yeah,
can be very demotivating. And I've
sure,
experienced it. I have gone all over the place with my leadership style until I could identify my own true core values and then align to that, and
yeah,
then align my external environment to how I want to be.
yeah. And how much more frustrating on top of that, if the organization's core values and tenets are in contrast to the type of individuals that are being promoted and put into these positions of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes extremely frustrating and demotivating.
I
And
mean,
it can just the house of cards can come crumbling down, right? Just tumbling down.
the cognitive dissonance that people experience day in and day out working in these organizations that tell us that we're families, but then when the hard times hit, we're no longer family or like an OPEX number. Like that's exactly what happens when everybody's like, we believe in diversity and inclusion and we believe in supportive leaders, but we're still going to promote the same type of person into these
Yeah.
leadership roles, and then we never get anybody to model what different leadership styles might look like.
What do you think, Iliana, needs to happen then at the upper echelons then? Is it a question of a waiting game? Are we waiting for these guys to retire and exit the industry? Like you're nodding your head, so
Yeah, I mean, I have not. I, I'm a coach. I can pretty quickly identify when somebody is coachable. Very, very few people in those positions are, because we have reinforced their beliefs that the way they are is the right way to be. Right. And I don't believe that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We have neuroplasticity well into our old way age, so you can. People just don't want to change. That's what
right.
it comes down to. And there's no impetus for them to change. It's paid off well for them, right? So unless you have some sort of like social motive that you want to leave this world a better place or whatever, and you see that through transforming yourself first, maybe. But for the most part, as you said, we need a changing of the old guard before we can actually really move the needle on it. The best we can do, and that's how I approach it, is by building the next generation leaders to be the type of leaders that the world needs.
If we can't really affect the change at the upper echelons, right? And we can't expect them to change until they retire, basically, or die, or what have
Mm-hmm.
you. I guess the question is then, how does one affect change from a leadership perspective at the individual level?
So what I would say is, um, you do have some levers. It's just we have to temper our expectations as to what can be done. And it's usually when you're making change, it's a long road, and we never advocate like a drastic change. We always advocate for like testable experiments so that you can see how you feel about the change, so you can adjust and so on and so forth. And then like 1% better every day makes it 1,000 times better. I don't know what timeline. There's some sort of
Right.
thing that goes in
I know
there,
what you're
right?
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I say is like, what can you demonstrate that will eventually reverberate through the people with whom you work, right? So I look at it, for example, the coaches that I work with just been in leadership positions, freaking out. They have no idea how to lead these teams. They hate it. And then we talk about like the tools that are available to them, and it's a completely different story. Like all of a sudden they're gung-ho to be servant leaders. And so what I always recommend to people is, first of all, redefine your role as a leader. Who do you think you need to be as a leader? When I think about that, I will provide answers as a last resort. I want to empower people and enable them to do their best work. And I want to coach them for performance and results and growth, right? So then that affects the way that I lead myself. So how do I present myself to the world? That sometimes is enough, because if enough people see you model the right behavior and reevaluate how that makes them feel, then you're already making a change, right? But the other thing is, think about like at your level, how many next generation leaders do you touch within your organization, right? Are you actually leveraging their point of view effectively? So when I start working somewhere, or like even when I'm doing project management, I ask a million questions because I know the frameworks, but I don't want to assume what is out there, how people do their best work. And then when I have to come up with a solution to a problem, I will co-create with the team. So I would actually challenge them to bring solutions to me, provide feedback, and evolve, right? So again, like the servant leadership has its limits. If we got to pump something out in a day, no, I can't do that. But I can certainly, whether it's one-on-one or as a group, coach my team through the problem solving process, through the presentation process, so that I don't have to tell them, what word to change the next time. They know what the essence of what we're trying to achieve is and how to do that with the tools they have.
I love that. Knowing how much change you can realistically influence within your
Hmm.
organization, within your sphere, tempering, you know, the goals you might have personally as a leader that you want
Hmm.
to affect.
Exactly. And the one thing that I always tell people is like just ask questions, because we tell our teams most of the time that's how we were brought up in this corporate world, and so you naturally gravitate to that. So do I. But force yourself to ask questions and different points of view, and you would be surprised with the creativity and the quality of solutions that comes through a team that feels like they can collaborate together on a problem.
And I guess the important part is being able to deliver on these collaborative results that you're being provided with, these gems from the team, and showing that you are enacting them, and you are delivering on what has been collectively brought together. How many
That's
times
an
have you seen
excellent
like
point.
yeah, because how many times have we seen that, oh, we want your feedback, and then you give your feedback and it's like, great, thanks, they're all stupid. We're gonna keep doing
Yeah.
things the way it is.
Oh my God, that was always the bane of my existence, right? So
Yeah,
you've known me for the better part of a decade. Like I can't keep my mouth shut. I don't believe that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
right.
And I want to be able to verbalize my feedback and have it accepted. And so towards the later part of my career, when I was leading people and my leaders would try to do these calls where it was like, give me your feedback, I would either say, I'm not getting on a call where we're going to talk about things you're not going to implement, or I would be the most vocal person in that room about all the things that are wrong, and then maintaining that I would like my leader to communicate next steps on how all of this is going to be implemented and staying on top of that.
Which can be a scary thing,
Oh,
right?
totally. Yeah.
And some individuals, not to name any names, are perfectly comfortable and feel empowered to do that, challenging the leadership, challenging the current mindset. What if you're not that type of an individual where you feel that you can buck the trend?
Hmm. That's where I would work with somebody that I coach to kind of establish what their values are and what boundaries they're willing to push, right?
Right.
So you're absolutely right. I am comfortable with doing this, and not only am I comfortable with doing this, but I know that the likely outcome is that I lose my job, and I'm comfortable with that likely outcome because I mean, such as life, I have determined that there's certain values of mine that are not to be violated, and I
Yeah.
don't want to work for organizations that violate them on a routine basis. But that's my decision, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe if I was fully dependent on this job, I would feel differently, but I do have a partner who is able to cover for me when I'm not working. Right? Or there's just some people that like that's never going to be how you present yourself in a
Yeah.
meeting, right? But you got to start with what are my values and how much am I going to allow somebody to violate these values before I react, and that's a very personal decision.
It's going to be different for everyone. And you're right. Is this the hill that I want to die on, or can I endure this injustice and live to fight another day?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be a point where your back will be up against the wall, and
Mhm.
the consequences of these difficult conversations can be dire,
Mhm.
or they can be delightfully surprising.
I would say generally you know whether it's going to be delightfully surprising going into
Yeah,
the conversation,
yeah.
right? And I
Hence the
think most of
surprise.
the
Hence
play.
the surprise
Yeah.
part. Right.
But the thing is, like, I like what you said around, like, is this the hill that I want to die on? But I want to add one caveat is that when we make those decisions ad hoc, we're literally reacting in the moment, right? So, what are you reacting based on? You're reacting based on your programming of what is expected to you within an organization. And you're like, no, that's not the hill I want to die on. And then you go home and you feel crappy and you block it, right? If you sit down and identify your values, when something like that happens, it's not guesswork how you're going to react.
You'll know.
It's you'll know why
Right.
and how you're doing things, right? So that's why I always advocate know what your own values are and where you stand on issues and how far you're willing to be pushed, so that when that scary moment comes, you're not processing all of this information and trying to make a decision on the spot.
It really all requires serious reflection. I guess I was thinking about where do I sit in these categories of leader,
Mm-hmm.
and truthfully, I thought I had an idea of where I sat in those categories, and I wasn't entirely happy with that. And but it's great. It was good for me because it made me realize where it could be, because I guess I sometimes do think that you're either a certain kind of leader or you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate this conversation because I can see the value that you bring to your clients and helping them to develop that.
I appreciate you saying that. It is something that I finally kind of honed in next generation leaders, or where I like to put my effort for that specific reason, is that I can amplify my own impact in the world, right? But to answer your question around like, okay, well, I don't necessarily love where I am. What do I do about it? The first thing, as you pointed out, is a mindset shift, right? When you say I need to be X, Y, and Z, that's a limiting belief. You can be whatever you want to be, whoever you want to be, and show up in the world however you want to show up. Unfortunately, we as humans, we think in binary terms: yes, no, on, off. Even when I described 4 leadership styles, I led you to believe that that is as clear as it gets, but it's not, because we're talking about an X and Y axis that intersect. And so if you tomorrow take one step towards becoming a servant leader, you're moving along this axis closer to your, what we would call the North Star of, I know that this is what I'm working towards. I want to be a servant leader. This is not a one-step process. So what is my immediate next step to get me closer to that goal?
And I think that is where it becomes digestible for me to think of it in terms of increments,
Mm-hmm.
steps, because otherwise it's a yes or no answer. It's a black or white type of thing, and that's not how. I mean, it's um, very polarizing outcomes, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this or that, but
Yeah.
it excludes the in between, which is where I think all the fun stuff is.
Exactly. And like when you have that yes or no outcome, for example, what happens if it's a no? You get demotivated because we don't allow ourselves to fail, because that's how we have defined progress. So another limiting belief that we talk about is that fail stands for first attempt in learning. So okay, I've defined an experiment, I've defined that one step. What is a successful experiment for me? And usually I just want to learn from it. I want to learn whether the action that I put in place worked, whether it felt good to me, because, like, what if it feels completely unnatural to me? I'm never going to be able to integrate that in my life. Or if it didn't work for whatever reason, what did I learn from it so that I can apply that to my next experiment?
Yeah. When you were going through your project management example, the first thing that popped into mind was the scientific method. It's very methodical and it's very logical. It makes a lot of sense, and it's actually very common sense
Mhm.
approach. And it's amazing to me how difficult it can be to implement common sense anywhere. In our own personal lives, let alone in an organization.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about the organization, I told you less than 35% of leaders really care to make that type of like effort,
Yeah.
whether it's for you as an individual or for the organization.
Yeah.
Like when you're up against that, what do you do? Right?
Right. Iliana, this is awesome. What needs to happen from a leadership development perspective when it comes to the organization from a top down perspective in terms of bringing in people like yourself beyond the VP level, beyond the C level? Is coaching something that should be accessible to everyone across the organization? Is
Mm-hmm.
that something that is just simply not tenable or sustainable?
So I don't even know that it's about the volume of coaching. So what I observe is for some very good reasons, companies gravitate to better up and growth space, which are coaching platforms. And then there's people like me who deliver the coaching, for example, right? It gives you a sense of control because you're dealing with a large organization. But more often than not, you don't get a coach who has an expertise, deep expertise like I have in terms of not just leadership development in isolation, but leadership development within your organization so that we can continue to drive the context of your organization forward. So what I would say is, at the very least, your frontline leaders and maybe their leaders should be within some sort of coaching program, but with somebody who has the right skill set and knowledge to really help. And the other piece is that it's like we don't look at professional development holistically when we talk to our teams. It's always like, this is how you get promoted. This is how we do your performance reviews. This is the training you have to do, and now you got to do coaching. But how does that all tie in, right? Most people, what they don't realize is that there's research out there that says high performers really do care about some things, like whether you're paying them fairly, whether you're, like the environment of the organization. But what really truly matters to them is how are they supported in their personal and professional growth. And so, for example, just coaching individually doesn't do the trick, because then we don't have the long-term support within the organization to maintain those learnings. Training is always the go-to. I will never understand when the Great Resignation hit and everybody went in a panic. Everybody started like buying courses for their teams. Courses for what? That's not what people are frustrated with. And it's a point in time learning. What I would really love to see is organizations enable their teams to really build the leadership muscle by identifying key capabilities that are required in each role and make it very clear what type of metrics you need to hit and what behaviors you need to develop in order to step into a position like that. Have the right training for sure available there, and then have very targeted coaching with the right coach so that you can actually help this person integrate all of their learnings. So that's the most important thing, is that we as coaches help integrate, but we need to be exposed to the larger organizational context so that we can really help people integrate in the context of that organization.
We have a lot of ground to cover. It seems, we just scratched the surface, and I think the work that you do is really invaluable. How would an organization that is interested in creating this framework, how would it get a hold of you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Iliana Rocha. I'm sure that when this goes out, there's going to be some deets in there. Perfect. And the website is clubnet.ca. I would say if you're even interested in bouncing ideas, like get in touch with me. I'm always open. I'm always open to hear you out and maybe even give you free strategies if there's like low hanging fruit, right? And you and I joked earlier that my email signature reads connector of dots and people, is because, to your point earlier, you like to pay it forward in terms of how somebody supported you, and I want to do the same. So if I don't have the particular skill set, I'm very specific when I select clients. I want to know that I can help them. And so if I can't, though, I have a very large network that I can leverage in order to get you to the right expert. So all of that to say is that the Clubnet corporate phone tree is my personal cell phone. So you get in touch with me and we go from there.
All right, we'll go straight to the source.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation. It's really fantastic to reconnect with you. I can't wait till we have another. It's been a real pleasure to have you on Techno Brew. Everyone who, if you're interested, please reach out to Iliana and listen to the podcast. We're now available on Amazon and Google Cast, Spotify, and Apple Podcast, in addition to the YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Iliana. I honestly can't thank you enough for being here.
Thank you for having me. It has been a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to our next chat.
Absolutely.